Tell me your story. Did you always know that you were going to be a writer, like when you were growing up?
No, no, this was an accident actually. In 2009, I was reading, I'd really gotten into the paranormal romance reading, and one of my favorite authors was Gina Maxwell.
Okay.
And I had read her 5th book in the Lords of the Underworld series, and I had turned the last page and I was in awe of how invested I was in these characters, like that don't exist and can't exist because people don't actually have demons, you know, from Pandora's box inside of them that I know of. And so I started just thinking, you know, if I was going to put 2 characters together, what 2 characters would I choose? And I just started coming up with this, with these 2 people and their backstories and how do they know each other and what's their conflicts and stuff like that. And I just kept doing it in my head while I was, you know, working or taking the kids to school and doing all the parent stuff. And then I started writing it down because I thought, well, I have a terrible memory, and if I don't write this down, I'm going to forget this. And then by then they felt like real people to me. So it was just going to be for me. It was just going to, I was like, maybe some friends will read it. Who knows, you know? And the more I started writing it, the more invested I became in the story. And then I thought, why not try to get it published? What's the worst they can say? No.
Yeah,
you know? So I Googled how to write fiction well. True story, right? Absolute true story. How to write fiction well. And then I learned everything that I possibly could about it. And then when I felt I was ready, I Googled how to get a literary agent or, you know, published and things like that. And went from there. I was rejected 30 times. I wrote the book. It took me 3 years. I did like 14 different rewrites.
Was this Dark King?
This was, no, it's actually never been published yet.
Okay.
It will be next year. Oh, you guys know the, shh, don't tell them that. I'm actually in the process of doing a full edit on it right now. This was my very first contract actually, but it got put on the back burner. So when I got my first contract in 2012, this book, it's a paranormal romance with vampires and angels, was supposed to be published, but I needed an income, a steady income, in order to be able to work full-time as an author. And so my publisher said, well, why don't you put out a category romance real quick? We'll put that out digitally, and then we can, you know, go from there. You'll be getting a little bit of money. And I thought, great. So I wrote the book in 2 months. We published it in July of 2012. It's called Seducing Cinderella, and within 4 weeks, it hit the USA Today list, the New York Times list, and we completely surprised the crap out of all of us. We were like, what just happened? So that is how I accidentally became a contemporary romance author, because from that point on, they were like, well, now we need book 2, now we need book 3. So so The Dark King, which released last September, actually it was about a year ago, was the first time I got back into the fantasy paranormal genre, because I accidentally got myself pigeonholed into contemporary romance. So I'm very happy to be back into my original genre, and so yeah.
That's awesome.
It's exciting.
Now, I love a good genre book, of course. I write fantasy. But what was it about romance that like, drew you in?
So my mom once asked me, why can't you write something other than romance? Because she doesn't read romance. And I said, here's the thing, Mom. Any mood that I'm in, no matter what kind of book that I want to read, whether I want to read a comedy, a thriller, suspense, you know, Western, Regency, anything, I can get that, and I can get a romance story at the same time. Because there's not infinite really, but, you know, like, dozens and dozens of subgenres in romance. So you can get the love story and get all of the action or the comedy or the, you know, anything that you're looking for. So that's why I prefer romance, because I'm a hopeless romantic at heart, and I always want a love story and a happy ever after at the end.
That's awesome, though. And there's been such like a resurgence of the romance genre, it seems like, in recent years. Which is great, because romance in general, especially more like erotic romance, there's been kind of like a stigma against it, and it being seen as like less than purely literary books. So how do you feel about that? What's your response to that when you hear those kind of things?
It hurts. It stings us a lot in the romance community. In my opinion, it is, we're looked at as sometimes having trite stories, or anyone could write a romance, or anything like, things of that nature. And honestly, when you've got, let's say, your plot about what's happening externally, and you've got the plot about these two people coming together, whether they know each other, whether they don't, all the obstacles that they have to overcome within each other, with themselves, plus weaving this relationship together and overcoming that, you're technically writing two plots.
Yeah.
And you have to weave it and arc it together. It's not easy. You know what I mean? And that's the thing that a lot of people don't understand. They look down on the romance genre, and it's very difficult to do well. And so I think it's unfortunate. It's a $1 billion, it's a $1 billion industry.
It is one of the best selling.
Yeah, and so to look down on a $1 billion industry is kind of silly in my opinion. But it's empowering. It's females, the majority females writing for females, and we talk about positivity and body positivity, sex positivity, things of that, overcoming things, and feminist stuff. And I just think it's a fantastic genre, and I think it's a very healthy genre for young women to read, because a lot of the things that we see on TV and in movies and things of that nature are unhealthy representations of relationships and what love is.
Written by women for women.
Correct. Through the male gaze as opposed to the female gaze. So.
That's great that you mentioned that. I actually do get asked a lot, like, how could I write characters better? And I say, read a romance book, because small space, but you have to pack a lot in there. So I love that. Well, I mentioned before that romance is getting this resurge of popularity. Why do you think that is? Is it just TikTok, or is there something more to it, you think?
I mean, it did happen when 50 Shades was released. So I have a double-edged sword for me. I don't love that series because it's a misrepresentation of the BDSM in the kink community, which I have problems with. But I also have to be very grateful for the series, because it did bring a lot of readers back into that passion, into reading and reading romance. And so if I had $1 for every reader that said to me, I read 50 Shades, and then the first book that I picked up afterwards was Seducing Cinderella, I can't hate it. I can't be mad at it. So that's when I think women, we always put ourselves last. Self-care is last. Everything, our hobbies, our time to ourselves. And I think when women picked up that series and then continued on with books, I think it brought that sense of self-care and that escapism, and that, I'm taking time out for myself. I'm pouring myself a glass of wine, or I'm, reading 5 pages in between, this and that, kids' appointments or whatever it is.
On the sidelines of the soccer field.
Exactly. And so I think, and there's something for everyone in this genre. Whether you like the lighter stuff, the sweeter stuff, all the way down to the dark and the intense stuff. So I think it's great.
It's wonderful. Well, we have to talk craft, because obviously that's my favorite thing, being a writer. All of your books, whether they're written in third person or first person, tend to be dual POV. So why do you do that, and how do you create dual point of view characters in such realistic and fully realized ways?
I choose dual POV because my favorite thing is to be inside the male's head, honestly.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm a girl, I know how we think, right? I know how that works. I know how I think. I know how women in general, typically think. So to be in the heroine's POV to me is, I wouldn't want to say uninteresting. It's not uninteresting. It's just not something, it's just something normal for me, But to be in a male's POV where you can hear, what they're not saying on the page. So, there's always, with the romance, the guy is feeling these feelings that he doesn't want to reconcile with, or, he's whatever. But, in his head, you get to hear that. You get to hear, how he feels about the heroine or the other hero, whatever. How he's attracted to this person, what he finds different about them, what is, making his bells jingle, I guess you could say. And so I love that, I love being in their headspace. and I love reading their headspace. So I do dual POV because I don't want to miss out on that.
Okay.
I want to know how they feel as well.
Yeah.
So even in like, you know, when I have one male book, and that was fun because I got to be in both all the time.
That's nice. Do you think using that kind of helps soften some like ultra male representation that we get? Like if you're online, it's called alpha holes, like
Alpha
super
holes, yeah.
alpha, like male love interests.
Yeah, so I think mine, and I have two longtime readers here, so they can maybe answer this better than me, but I think I straddle that line. Like my guys are very, they're very alpha, they're very in control, they like control, not control over the heroine, obviously, except in the bedroom. But, but they don't, I think, cross over into that toxic area where some of the dark romance can go into. And it's not because I don't enjoy reading some of those, because I do, but I feel like with my heroes, I really want things to be a healthy representation. So even in the Deviant Kings series, which is the one that's currently out right now, the most recent one, it's BDSM. But I have very accurate representations. I feature aftercare. I feature a lot of consent, and some of the darker romance, they have dubious consent and they don't talk about the aftercare. So it's not that one is better than the other. It's just that that's how I prefer to
present it.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah.
That makes sense. So it seems like your stories are definitely more character driven then, or do you think they're more plot driven?
Character driven for sure. I always start with my hero, and I figure out what his deal is, and then I figure out, okay, what's the love interest that he needs to basically bring him to his knees. That's like, how do I just make him crumble? And so then from there, I figure out, okay, well, so then what's their story? How do they know each other? What's their background? What are they dealing with? What's their goals, motivations, conflicts, things like that. So yeah, I'm very character driven. In fact, several years back, I want to say 5 or 6 years back, James Patterson decided that he wanted to have an imprint or a line with, I think he was with Little Brown or something. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And he was going to publish, essentially, books that were of different genres.
Right.
And romance was one of them.
That's how like the Carrie Maniscalco books, right? The Wicked Kingdom, or?
I don't think so. This was like, they were supposed to be in front of the grocery stores and stuff, so they were supposed to be impulse buys.
Yeah.
And they would have...
You could read them in like an hour.
Yeah, they were shorter.
I read some of those,
Yeah, and they were going to have his name and the author's name on it because he was going to edit them. And so I was accepted into that line, but he kept editing all of my character stuff out.
Oh no.
And so, like, my characters suddenly felt very two-dimensional, like they had no depth to them.
Yeah.
And so by the time I finished editing it, I thought, you know what, it doesn't behoove me to do this, because if someone were to pick up that book and love it, then to go to my entire backlist, which is completely different, you know, that's not an accurate representation of my story, so it's not doing me any favors. Yeah. So I actually canceled that contract because he's very action-driven in his books, you know, and he writes thrillers, so that makes sense for him. But for me, it's about the story of the people, so everything else that they're doing is kind of secondary.
It was,
it was like, am I honestly canceling a contract with James Patterson right now? Yes, I am. Okay, so.
Okay, this is my life.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Well, good for you though, because you're right, you know, authors get fans to love them for their style of writing. So it's the braver choice to make.
It was.
Speaking of your style of writing, when you draft, like how do you approach that first draft? 'Cause I know we usually get audience members that want to be writers. Are you like a plotter, or do you just write by the seat of your pants?
I used to be a pantser, so when I wrote Desires of the Soul, which is the very first book I wrote, that was very much pantsed. I had no idea, other than what the characters were, like, because I said that's how I started.
Yeah.
I had no idea what was happening, and I just wrote and wrote and wrote. And at this time, like, I didn't realize that, like, books typically, you know, publishers want, like, okay, a full-length book is anywhere between, you know, 90,000 or 8,000 and, you know, 100 or something like that. This sucker was like 140 some thousand. I was like, I keep writing until the end of the story, right? And then I get it done, and I was like reading about, how to submit to publishing houses, and I was like, oh, they want this way shorter. So I had to learn how to curb it down. But I've turned into now, I would say I'm a combination of both. I like to, I was taught by my first publisher to read Save the Cat. I don't know if you've heard that.
Yes, I have.
So Save the Cat is a great book on craft. It's actually written for screenwriters.
Yeah.
But it's so good with the beats.
Yeah.
And I love how it uses real life, or like movies that we are all familiar with Pretty Women or Pretty Woman and things like that.
Right.
So
you see like Star Wars break it
down. Yeah, he breaks it down so you can really see where the beats are. So that's what I do now is I basically just I know where my beats are, what the inciting incident is, where the fun and games are going to be, the high point desires, or not desires of the soul, the dark night of the soul, all that stuff. And then I kind of use an Excel spreadsheet and I say, chapter 1's going to be this, and I just have an idea of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But then I let my characters do what they want. Yeah. Because I learned the hard way with Seducing Cinderella. The hero was supposed to be very surly, chip on his shoulder, angry at the world kind of thing. And you can see in the first chapter when you meet him, that's how he starts out. And as soon as he meets the heroine, he turns into this charming guy. And I was like, the first time I was writing, I was like, no, that's not right. Delete. And I was like, angry. And then he's smiling and making jokes. I'm like, no. I did that 3 times. And then finally I was like, fine, you just do whatever you want. And I'm so glad that I listened to him, because I think one of the main reasons that book did so well is because people love Reed. Yeah. And so so I've learned to listen to my characters, and I just I'm like, it's not on script, but sometimes they know better than I do, so. I'm sure you had that experience before too, when they just go.
Yeah,
throw the outline out the window.
Like a beautiful dream, and the book ends up being something else. Yeah. I'd love to open up to questions to the audience. If you guys have anything, raise your hand. Yeah.
I have a question. When you write, how long do you write? I mean, with me, when I write, it's like turning on the faucet and it just keeps gushing out and I can't stop, or I lose the momentum and the flow.
Can you teach me how to do that?
I mean, my characters take over my life. I have dreams about them. They just bother me.
Yeah, all the time.
They want their story told.
No, unfortunately, I do not have that problem or benefit, obviously. Yeah. So with me, it's very hard. I'm very ADHD, and so I'm not good with schedules. I'm not good with,
like being regimented.
That. So when I do writing sprints with my friends, my author friends. So we will say, okay, we're starting now. We go do 30-minute sprints, and so we type as much or write as much as we can. At the end of 30 minutes, we check in, how many words, how many pages, how many whatever, whatever if we're writing or editing. And we just keep going, and some days are better than others. I'm a very slow writer because I taught myself. I did not teach myself. I didn't learn how to fast draft. Mm-hmm. So I perfect my writing as I go along, which takes forever. However, with this last book that I wrote, I think I've learned a hack to my system, and I think it's longhand. So I started writing chapters longhand, and with that, I'm not perfecting it. I'm just writing, I'm not even writing action tags for dialogue. I'm writing their name just so I know who says it. Mm-hmm. I'm just scribbling stuff, and that gives me a bare bones thing to work with, and then I dictate it into my document, and then from there, I can make it pretty.
That's really smart. I like that.
Yeah.
I did kind of a similar thing when I was drafting The Frozen Crown because I was working full time. So I was just writing on my lunch break, and that was just whatever I could get down.
Yeah.
But I have an author friend, MJ Kuhn, who wrote Among Thieves, a great best-selling novel. She kind of has a similar process where she just blah, and all the words come, but she makes herself stop before she reaches the end of the scene, so she has something to look forward to the next day. Oh. So she kind of maintains her momentum that way.
That's a great idea.
So, yeah. Any other questions? All right, well, we're almost done with our time here, but before we go, let's play some romance trope showdowns.
Okay.
So
okay.
I'm going to give you 2 common romance tropes, and you just tell me your favorite. You can explain or not. It's
Okay.
up to you. Would you rather read something that's enemies to lovers or like the bodyguard love interest trope?
My daughter would say enemies to lovers. That is her catnip. That is her catnip. That's my daughter in the front row there. But I prefer bodyguard. Man, give me a dude who's just like willing to kill anyone for her, you know, like that kind of a thing. I love the bodyguard trope. You know, he's always looking for threats and whatever and manhandling her. That's,
Gotcha.
I like that a lot.
There's something to be said for that. All right, fake dating or character in disguise?
Fake dating, because now, again, they're in a situation where they have to be touching.
Yeah.
They've got to be touching, they've got to be pulling it off. That creates amazing sexual tension. And there's usually forced proximity a lot of times with that, which is another one of my favorites. So, yeah.
But one bit at the end.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yes. Yep. Oh, darn, we must sleep together, naked.
All right, Insta love or best friends to lovers?
Okay, so I do love a good Insta love one, but the thing that I love about Best Friends to Lovers, and I also enjoy writing it because there's history there. So you've got all of that. First of all, it gets to the feelings quick because they don't have to get to know each other. They've got this history, even if it's off the page, right? And so you can like throw in memories there. Oh, I remember that one time when we were at the pond and we were swimming and we just, whatever. And so there's usually also some sexual tension that's been building up before the book even starts, at least for one of the characters.
Okay.
And I like that.
That's good.
Yeah.
Last one, love triangle or forbidden love?
Oh, leave the love triangles the hell alone. No. In fact, the only one we've read is the Arcana Chronicles by Cressley Cole, and I haven't read the last one, so don't spoil it for me. But I'm all for triads, reverse harem. Like, let's just all be together.
Let's just all have fun.
All of them. No choosing. Exactly. Why choose? I don't understand why we need to choose.
Awesome. Well, that's a great one to end on. Before we do, how do we find you online?
GinaLMaxwell.com is my website. Otherwise, you can just plug my name into Amazon and all my stuff will come up. I do have a backlist of 17 titles and more to come out next year. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. Thank you
so
for
much,
sitting down
Greta.
with me. Yeah. Thank you,
This is
everyone.
great.